Most entrepreneurs dream of the moment their business finally, stops bleeding money.
Oh, absolutely.
You grind for years. You finally look at your spreadsheet, and you are no longer in the red.
Right, that glorious zero.
Exactly. And the natural instinct, the sheer survival instinct is to take a breath, maybe build up a safety net, or, I don't know, finally pay yourself.
Yeah, buy a decent lunch for once.
Right. But what if the second you hit zero, the exact moment you stop losing money, you immediately take on the financial burden of an entirely new, massive organization?
It completely shatters the standard timeline of success in philanthropy.
It really does.
You are essentially turning the moment of your own financial survival into the starting gun for giving it all away.
And the counterintuitive leap is exactly what we have custom tailored for you today. Welcome to this deep dive.
Glad to be here.
Usually when we look at a text, we are examining the architectural blueprints of an entire skyscraper, right? Like manifestos, data sets, huge argument.
The big stuff.
Yeah, but today we are just looking at a single load-bearing brick. Because sometimes understanding the specific materials compressed into one brick tells you exactly how the entire building manages to stay standing.
It is about the density of the idea. We don't need 100 pages if we have one sentence that encodes an entire worldview.
So true. We are pulling a brief excerpt from a piece titled The Yael Foundation, Philanthropy and Jewish Identity.
A really fascinating piece.
It really is.
Yeah.
Our mission for you today is to unpack how one solitary quote from philanthropist Uri Poliavich acts as a masterclass in purpose-driven entrepreneurship.
We are diving into the intersection of business mechanics, the psychology of timing, and, the invisible architecture of community preservation.
Okay, let's unpack this. I'm going to read the quote in its entirety so you can keep it in the back of your mind as we go.
Go for it.
Here's what Uri Poliavich states. The very first moment the business broke even, the idea was to create something that would reinforce children's feelings about being part of the Jewish community. This is what pushed us toward creating the Yael Foundation.
Even though the source material is literally just those two sentences, it outlines 3 highly intentional phases of philanthropic evolution.
Right.
We're looking at a clear sequence: the trigger, the target, and the execution.
Let's start with that trigger, because the timing mentioned here really, it stops me in my tracks.
It's pretty jarring.
He says, the very first moment the business broke even. To put that in everyday terms, that is like planning to host a massive, lavish charity dinner for your entire neighborhood the very second you finally pay off your own grocery bill.
Yeah, you haven't built up your savings yet. You literally just stopped drowning.
Exactly. But wait, isn't that considered incredibly risky?
Oh, conventionally.
Very. Because standard business school logic dictates that you wait. Right. You build a massive moat around your company, you wait until you have a huge safety net, you become personally secure, and then you pivot to philanthropy.
What's fascinating here is what that unconventional timing reveals about the underlying mechanics of the business itself.
How so?
Well, you are bringing up the standard model where philanthropy is the victory lap.
Right, the giant novelty check at the end.
Exactly. It is the thing a founder does after they have won the race, usually as a way to give back from a place of extreme surplus. But tying a charitable vision to the break-even milestone flips that entirely.
It changes the whole motivation.
The philanthropy is no longer an afterthought or a PR move once the founder gets rich.
It seems like it makes the philanthropy the actual engine rather than the destination.
Let's look at what breaking even actually means in the life cycle of a business. In the startup world, there is a concept known as the Valley of Death.
Sounds cheerful.
Doesn't it? This is that brutal, high-stress period where a company has launched, initial capital is burning out, they're trying to find their footing in the market, and revenue is absolutely not covering costs.
Basically, the spreadsheet is just a wall of red numbers every month.
A wall of red and a constant ticking clock.
Yeah.
The vast majority of companies die in this valley. Surviving it requires an almost irrational amount of grit, late nights, and stress. It is mathematically and psychologically draining.
I can only imagine.
So when a founder finally claws their way out of that valley and hits the break-even point, the psychological relief is immense.
Right. You can finally breathe.
The normal human reaction is to hoard cash to make sure you never fall back into the valley of death again.
Which makes pivoting to a charitable mission at that precise second seem almost counter to human nature.
It does.
Unless, of course, the desire to fund that mission was the only thing giving the founder the psychological stamina to survive the valley of death in the first place.
That is the crucial takeaway. If your ultimate goal is just to buy a yacht or have a comfortable retirement, Breaking even is just step one on a long, exhausting road to personal wealth.
Right.
But if your driving force is an external mission, breaking even is the exact moment your economic vehicle finally has enough voltage to start powering that mission.
That makes so much sense.
The urgency doing this, the very first moment, shows there was absolutely no patience for waiting around for comfort.
The business was basically just a tool built to fund this specific goal.
Exactly.
And that brings up a really interesting question about the goal itself.
Yeah.
We know the trigger was hitting that break-even point, but hitting that milestone just provides the fuel.
You still have to steer.
Right. The real question is where you plant the car. Poliavich points it at a very specific target. The quote says the goal was to create something that would reinforce children's feelings about being part of the Jewish community.
Yeah, that phrasing is key.
I really want to focus on that word, feelings.
It is a deliberate and surprisingly complex choice of words for a business-minded philanthropist.
It is. Think about how legacy philanthropy usually operates. Historically, donors love to build what I would call hardware.
Tangible assets.
Yes, tangible assets. We are talking about Andrew Carnegie building thousands of libraries, or modern donors building hospital wings, community centers, and massive monuments.
Stuff you can see and touch.
Hardware is measurable. You can cut a ribbon, take a photo, point to a building, and say, I made that happen.
With your name in big brass letters.
Exactly. But Poliavich is explicitly targeting software, the internal emotional landscape of children.
Which is invisible.
Right. It seems to me that focusing on feelings is a rejection of tangible legacy. You can't put your name on a feeling. It implies a much longer-term, almost invisible goal.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it reveals a deeply sophisticated understanding of how cultural identity actually functions.
Tell me more about that.
We can use your hardware and software analogy. You can build the most beautiful, state-of-the-art community center in the world.
The best hardware money can buy.
Exactly. You can fill it with historical archives and cultural artifacts. But if the next generation does not possess an internal emotional draw to walk through those doors, that multi-million-dollar building is functionally a mausoleum.
Oh, wow. That is a stark way to put it.
But it's true. The hardware is useless if the user doesn't have the software to engage with it.
Because identity in a modern, fragmented world isn't something you can just force onto someone.
Not at all.
You can't just hand a teenager a textbook about their heritage and say, read this and now you belong.
The mechanics of identity formation, especially in adolescence, don't work through data transfer.
Right, it's not a download.
They work through emotional resonance. Fostering a community isn't about passing down cold facts. It is about cultivating an active, positive emotional connection.
Okay.
If a child feels a warm, reinforced connection to their identity early on, that feeling becomes the baseline for their entire life. They will seek out the community centers, they will read the history, they will pass it on to their own children.
But from a business perspective, that has to be terrifying.
Why do you say that?
Well, if you are an entrepreneur used to looking at key performance indicators, customer acquisition costs, and immediate profit margins, how do you measure the return on investment of a feeling?
Yeah, that's the hard part.
The ROI on a sense of belonging.
You really can't measure it in a quarterly report.
Right.
That is what makes this approach require such immense trust in the process. You are trading the immediate ego-driven gratification of a plaque on a wall for a delayed gratification that you might not fully see for a generation.
Because it takes time.
A secure sense of self in a child takes decades to fully manifest into community leadership.
Which means you have to be incredibly careful about how you deliver that software. You can't just wing it.
Absolutely not.
If your target is that specific, the internal emotional state of children, you need a very precise mechanism to execute the plan. And this brings us to the final part of the, quote, the execution phase. Yes. Poliavich says, this is what pushed us toward creating the Yael Foundation. Here's where it gets really interesting.
The shift from philosophy to tangible action.
Think about the practical reality of this for a second. You just barely survived the startup valley of death. You finally broke even.
You're exhausted.
Beyond exhausted. If you are burning to do good, wouldn't it be infinitely easier to just write a check to an existing charity?
It's what most people do.
There are already schools, summer camps, and community groups doing work in this space. Why take on the massive bureaucratic friction of starting a brand new foundation from scratch?
This raises an important question about the nature of a founder's vision and the reality of how organizations function.
Okay, unpack that for me.
To understand why he didn't just write a check, we need to look at the verb he uses.
Wow.
Pushed. This is what pushed us toward creating.
Sounds like a compulsion, like there was no other option.
It implies that the existing options were insufficient. When you write a large check to a general community organization, you lose control over the specificity of the deployment.
Right, you just hand the money over.
Exactly. Organizations have their own gravity. They have overhead, they have building maintenance, they have administrative costs.
Keeping the lights on.
Right. Your specific vision reinforcing the emotional software of children can very easily get diluted into their broader operational needs.
I see. The money you intended for software gets absorbed by their need to fix the roof of the hardware.
Or it gets put into programs that are educational but not necessarily emotionally resonant.
Yeah, that makes sense.
If your methodology is highly specific, throwing money into a general pot won't achieve the surgical result you are looking for. Creating a foundation is essentially deciding to launch a second startup immediately after surviving your first one.
And the friction involved in that is no joke. Creating a foundation isn't just opening a new bank account.
Oh, not even close.
You have to navigate tax statuses, like filing for a 501c3 if you're in the U.S., or the equivalent elsewhere.
Lawyers, accountants.
Right. You have to form a board of directors, draft bylaws, hire specialized staff, set up compliance mechanisms. You are volunteering for mountains of ongoing administrative overhead.
You don't take on that level of legal and operational burden unless you are absolutely convinced that your specific approach is missing from the current ecosystem.
It'd have to be worth the pain.
Exactly.
Yeah.
They had to build a custom vehicle because no existing vehicle was designed to carry their exact payload to their exact destination.
It perfectly ties together the entire journey. The business was the economic engine built to hit break even so it could generate fuel.
Yes.
The target was the highly specific, hard-to-measure emotional software of the next generation. And the Yael Foundation was the custom-built vehicle required to transport that fuel to that target without it spilling or being diverted along the way.
It is a closed loop of purpose. Every single phase is dictated by the end goal.
So what does this all mean for you listening today?
That's the big question.
We promised at the start that we would unpack how a single sentence could reveal an entire philosophy, and this tiny excerpt from Uri Poliavich has given us a literal blueprint for a completely different kind of entrepreneurial success.
It really has.
It challenges almost every default assumption we have about business and giving.
It forces us to reevaluate the timelines we accept as normal.
It challenges the assumption of when to give, proving that hitting a break-even point doesn't have to be a moment to build a personal safety net. It can be the starting line for your ultimate mission.
A total paradigm shift.
It challenges the assumption of what to fund, pushing past the vanity of visible hardware and monuments to prioritize the invisible long-term emotional identity of children.
Which takes incredible patience.
And it challenges the assumption of how to give, showing that sometimes the easy route of writing a check isn't enough, and you have to take on the burden of building a new entity to keep your vision undiluted.
For everyone taking this journey with us, extracting these structural, mechanical insights from just a few lines of text is what makes exploring these sources so valuable.
It really is the best part.
You don't always need a sprawling manifesto to understand how a complex system works. Sometimes the DNA of an entire worldview is encoded right there in the syntax of a single thought.
Just like that load-bearing brick. Once you see what it is made of, you understand exactly how the whole structure stands tall.
Perfect analogy.
But before we wrap up, we want to leave you with one final thought to mull over on your own. We have analyzed the mechanics and the philosophy of this quote, but think about the practical application in your own life.
Taking this out of the realm of high-level philanthropy and bringing it into the day-to-day.
Imagine your own work, your own projects, or your own business. If an entrepreneur views the act of breaking even, not as the moment they finally get to relax and reap personal rewards, but rather as the starting gun for a massive external responsibility.
Which is a heavy burden to take on.
Right, but how might that fundamentally change the way a business is run on a random Tuesday?
How does that shift in motivation change the way you navigate a supply chain crisis, or how you interact with your team when the stress is peaking?
If the ultimate goal isn't just a slightly larger profit margin for yourself, but the funding of a mission that reinforces the very identity of the next generation, does the daily grind suddenly look a lot less like a grind and a lot more like a crusade?
It changes everything.
It is something to seriously consider the next time you find yourself staring at a wall of red numbers on a spreadsheet, wondering what this stress is all for.
Maybe it's for something bigger.
Maybe you aren't just trying to survive the valley of death. Maybe you are just trying to build an engine.